When we are on a spiritual path or we're going through a spiritual awakening, now depending on the path you might have been in, the setting within which you were born, which would be where you are most connected to whatever form of, say, religion, or whatever form in which you were most accustomed to experiencing spirituality with. So you would have had some association. Now, to give you an example, I'll give you my own example. So I was born in a Sikh family. Yeah, I was born in a Sikh family. And I remember when I was very, very little, I used to love going into my mother's cupboards and, just looking through things as children do. And there was a metal almirah, they called them. So you open this, and while my mother was at work, I was home alone and getting up to no good as always. And I opened this and I found this card, and on this card was a picture that I'd never seen before, but it was a picture of what looked like a deity with this beautiful handsome man sitting with his crossed legs, and he had an animal skin around him, very muscular, and he had snakes all around him, and he had a waterfall coming over his head, coming from his head to over his body, but not falling on his body. And I looked at that and I became so enamored with this. And my dad used to mine, and so every time he would come home, we would have these wonderful crystals. Of course, at that time I didn't even know what these were, but I was fascinated by these beautiful stones. Now I took those stones and I made them as an altar for that photo that I found. I took that photo and I put it up there, and I said, this is my husband, and this is the man that I'm going to spend the rest of my life with. And before I'd go to bed, I would always wear lipstick. I mean, I wasn't even a teenager at that time, and I had a lipstick that my mother had given me. I don't know whether you get these anymore. They change color, so they look green, and when you apply them, they change color to pink or to rose blush. Anyway, so my mother had given me that as, I can have it. And so every night without fail, I'd apply it. My dad would tuck me in and say, well, why do you do this every night? And I said, well, because you see that man in that picture, he's going to come and visit me tonight. He comes in my dream. Every night, Daddy, I see him. And I had this sweet, it was sugar-coated fennel seeds. Now we used to call this sof, and my dad used to bring these especially for me so that I could do this little ritual that I had created on my own. And remember, we were in a Sikh family, so we never did any of these things that I was suddenly sort of moving towards. So my dad would bring this so that I could then go and stick on the mouth of this picture, and lo and behold, this thing would disappear the next day. And my parents made a lot of fun of me, and they laughed, and it became sort of very funny and a source of great comedy in the house, because nobody could really understand what I was doing. And I was really convinced that this went. Now, 20 years after this, sorry, I'm digressing a bit, but 20 years after this, in my adult life, I had a little idol of Lord Shiva, and I did the exact same thing, and lo and behold, that thing disappeared. Now, what the story behind why it's disappeared is, I don't know, but chances are it could have gone to, because these things do happen. Anyway, now going back. So although my setting was in a Sikh, but I was gravitating towards this, and I had said, oh, well, this is, and I remember my mother saying to me, don't say that, because this is a god for the Hindus. This is he's up there and you're kind of down here. We're humans. We don't mingle with the gods. And I said, that's just ridiculous, because I don't think so, because I mingle with him, I know, because I see him, he comes to me, he comes into my dreams. And they just took it as a little girl. There is a book that somebody had lent to me, which I never got to read, but if any of you know of it or read it, it's a book called The Original Vision, which is about children who are able to see things, and they do see things, and a lot of the times adults will dismiss these as, you know, imagination, or the kid has a vivid imagination, or sometimes kids will have imaginary friends. So it's not far from the truth, you know, other portals, other dimensions. So when you're going through your spiritual awakening, actually, when you are seeing things, and you see, when you were seeing things with innocence, when you were seeing things just as they are, you would then just see things just as they are. So when I was that little, the other thing that I saw all of the time was a gold cobra snake. So a golden cobra that was with me all the time. It never left me. I could be sitting here and saying, there it is. And everybody else said, well, no, nobody can see the snake. And eventually my mother did sort of take me to Hindu priests, you know, and all they ever said was she's blessed. And we didn't understand it because my family, they were Sikh. So they were brought up very differently. For them, Guru Granth Sahib Ji was the last guru, and that's what they knew, and they knew about just one God. But I gravitated towards that. Now, our belief system that we are born into, or that through which we experience our first encounter with all that is, and our first encounter doesn't have to mean that, oh, I went to the temple, or I prayed, or something. No, it's actually when something moves. That's very important in how it's going to shape the rest of your awakening. So another example that I can give you, and you can probably go back into your own life and think about an example of your own, is, so my granddad used to work on the committee at the Sikh temple in Nairobi. So that's where I grew up. I grew up in Nairobi in Kenya. And so we used to go to the Gurudwara a lot, you know, so the kids, you know, every time we'd come from school, sometimes we'd get dropped off at the Gurudwara and we'd spend our evening there. Sometimes on a Sunday, we would just be there longer. Sometimes, you know, we would sort of tag along when he had his meetings. Now, on one such occasion, so during the day when they didn't have any public, where they would place the Guru Granth Sahib, they had a separate room upstairs. So where you have the place where the public comes in and then they pay their obeisance, and then above that you had a room where they say that they go and put the Guru Granth Sahib or the Guru to sleep, or that's where the Guru rests. And there was nobody in the Gurudwara at that time, so nobody in the Sancto Sanctorum, and I gravitated towards that, and I just really wanted to know, like, what is it? What's the mystery? Why aren't we allowed to go upstairs? So I snuck up there. I went upstairs, and when I reached that room, I was just a very little girl. I must have been about 6, 7. I remember feeling as if you're in a cave and you can feel the hollow of the cave, that there is a big heavy sound, like a gigantic sound that isn't physical but it's there, and that I was just surrounded by some power, something, and that really shook me, and I got a little bit scared, yet I was also very comfortable in it. But I ran down the stairs, and I did not tell anyone about it until much later. And the reason why I didn't tell anybody about it is because I thought I'd done something wrong, and, you know, that I would get told off because I Now, when you then have your spiritual awakening, as you progress, now, if you had sort of been in a Christian way, and there would have been some Christian experiences, or what would be translated as Christian, or translated as Hindu, or translated as Sikh. Now, as a Sikh, your spiritual awakening would sort of bring into play, yes, you could say Kundalini, but that's a Sanskrit word, put that on the side. In that context, we would say that you have moved from Manmukh to Gurmukh. Manmukh is that you are a human, you're a human but guided by the mind. Gurmukh is you're guided by the Guru, inner Guru. So when you have a spiritual awakening, you're now a Gurmukh. When you Before a spiritual awakening, you are Manmukh. So without using the word, the terminology, Kundalini, yeah, yes, it is separate from spiritual awakening, but when you have that Kundalini awakening, now when in the Sikh context, what would it be called? Yeah, so we have also in that, now when you have the Amrit Dhara coming down you, yeah, we say that you have that darshan of Sachkhand. You have gone through that experience and you move into that, and so we say that has awakened inside of you. But you don't use that term. Now, if you're a Hindu or you've had a guru, and whether it's Vedic or Tantric, yeah, I'm being very broad and general about it. Of course, there will be different things. There'll be Shaivism, Shaktism. There's various, the Agamas, Tantras, whatever. And in some cases, neither of these things. Again, or like if you're in Nepal, again, culturally, there will be a different term used for the same phenomena. And like Christ consciousness, yeah, so there will be a different name. But when you awaken, now when you've awakened, you will be able to see the parallels and you'll know, yeah, we're talking about the same thing. You don't get lost in translation and you don't get lost in the idea that, say, in your culture or whatever you had been brought up with or what you have known about this, now that you've experienced this awakening, then you've heard that, this will take us a long time. One can't achieve that, or moksha, liberation, or oneness. One can't achieve it. It's just so difficult to be enlightened, and one has to go through the eightfold path, and there's no God. All the various things. Now, when we are still holding on to that, you could either be at the beginning of your awakening, or it's just you're going through the limbs. Remember, we said, as you're going through spiritual awakening, and then when you're going through Kundalini awakening, it is only when the Kundalini is able to pass through the third eye, when you're able to pass through that, break barriers completely. And at this point, release spiritual ideology, philosophy, religion, belief systems, how it ought to be. That's why when you have a spontaneous Kundalini awakening, in a way it's almost easier because you're not carrying so many concepts with you about what to expect, right? You haven't had a teacher or a guide or a book or anything. And in fact, to have the experience come to you after, right? To have the experience come to you before you go and look at what is what. So you're having the experience and then you realize, oh, so this is what is happening to me. It's a lot more authentic. And not to say that it isn't in the other instance, right? But when you have a lot of concepts that have been built up and a lot of ideology or a lot of association with what an awakening ought to look like, what enlightenment is, what liberation is, what self-realization is. I mean, there was a time when we went through this where if you are self-realizing, why would you get angry? If you are, going through an awakening, why would you do certain things? Where you just have to go back into scriptures, if that's your thing. You've got to go back into Durga Saptashati. And I mentioned this so many times, and we see how she was a warrior goddess, the way she slays all these demons that are nothing but the demons inside of ourselves. Yeah. But could we say that that war had to take place at the 3D level, literally? Yeah. But it was also taking place on a 4D and a 5D level, except the way that you feel it is different in every level, in every dimension. You feel it different. There is a pain you feel here. You hit yourself here, you feel the pain. Yeah, then there's a pain you feel with the same thing you will feel at a different level in a different dimension. So when you're going through your spiritual awakening, folks, Kundalini awakening, folks, don't get hooked onto the terminology or what has happened before, what somebody else is saying, and you say, well, actually, no, this isn't quite happening to me. Or you may look at somebody else and say, well, why are they doing this like this? Because surely that's not really how it's supposed to be. Well, that's the beauty about it, folks. And this is when, if you're genuinely going through your Kundalini spiritual awakening, then you can recognize it immediately. No doubt about it. Yeah, because you've moved beyond mind, you've moved beyond concept, you've moved beyond ideology, philosophy, religion, belief systems, everything that has kept you in a container, limited to this is how it is. Yeah. So these terms, folks, yes, they're great, we can understand them, but to think that something is limited to a particular culture or a particular belief system, yes, you can go into it like I narrated my story at the beginning, that yes, I went into that and I really was enamored with Shiva, and as my later life revealed, how I was going to then experience that in different ways, right? So it could be that when we are gravitating towards something different to that which we were brought up in terms of our first spiritual encounter, sometimes we're picking up from where we were left off at. So whatever was dominant, so that if that is still a dominant vibration that is carried forward from a previous lifetime, chances are that we're still going to have that. So folks, lots and lots of love. Take care of yourselves, and remember, fluidity, flexibility, but wherever you are, and if it is a bit rigid, and if it is a bit overwhelming, and if it is where you feel, you cannot unlimit yourself quite right now, it's okay. There is no rush. Take your time. It takes as long as it takes. For some it can take lifetimes, for some it can take seconds, for some it can take months and days. And so a lot of you have asked questions about exhaustion and questions about so many different things. Time is a concept, folks. Time is a concept, and you can make it work for you when you're able to jump over time, which we will talk about in another post. So much love. Take care, and thank you for sharing a part of yourself with me today.